You saw how the print function is called with a single argument to display a text message. However, it turns out that the print function can be called with any number of positional arguments. In this video, we will look at how to print multiple arguments using the print function and also alter its default behavior using the sub and end arguments. So far we have seen how to use the print function to print a string to the output, and we have only passed a single argument to the print function. So we use the print function to do things like print hello world, and we said that this string hello world is basically a single arguments. The print function can take multiple arguments to be printed, and when you pass multiple arguments to the print function, you need to separate these arguments by a comma. So if you want to print multiple strings using the print function, for example, let's say we are doing a countdown. So let's say I want to print a string 3, and then I want to print a string 2, the string 1, and the string go with exclamation point. And if you press enter here, this is what you get. You get the in the output 3 followed by space, followed by 2, followed by space, followed by 1, and followed by the word go and then exclamation point. Now, one thing you should realize here is that by default these arguments are separated by space in the output. So if you look at the strings, there is no space in the string itself. So only here in this string only contains 3, it doesn't contain any space. So by default the print function separates between its arguments by a space, and you can modify this default behavior. So you can change how the separate, so you can change this what separates the different arguments in the output by modifying the value of the sub parameter, and sub here stands for separator. So let's say, for example, in the previous statement I wanted to print I don't want any spaces to be printed, for example. So what you do is you say sub equal, and you define what is the what should separate the different arguments. Let's use an empty string. So here is an empty string. So this is a string that contains nothing, and let's run this statement. And now what you can see that there is nothing that separates the 4 strings that I supplied to the print function. And you can separate these by anything, so not necessarily an empty string. So let's say, for example, I want to separate between this by a dot, and if you click enter, you get a dot that separates between these strings. Now you need to notice that I have 4 arguments, but I have 3 separators, so the separator is inserted between or in between the arguments. This is useful for certain purposes. For example, let's say I want to print what looks like Windows path, so I can do something like print, and the first argument is the C, which stands for the C drive, and let's say in the C drive there's a folder called ITSE101, and in the under ITSE101 there is a folder called Lect2, which stands for lecture 2, and now what I want to do, I want to separate between these by a backslash. So remember, a backslash is the escape, it's basically an escape character, and if you want to display a backslash you actually need to use 2 backslashes. So you could also use escape sequences as separators in here. So if you press enter, this is what you get. You get a string that looks like a Windows path. So this is the first way to modify the behavior of the print function, which is using the sub parameter, and remember sub here stands for separator. The second way to modify the behavior of the print function is through changing the value of the end parameter. You should have noticed by now that the print function ends your message with a trailing new line. So here is a program that that has 5 print statements, and in the first, so what we're doing basically, we're basically printing 2 lines, and these 2 lines will be and then after those 2 lines we'll have an empty line, and then we're going to be printing 2 other lines. So if you run this, this is the output that you get. Let's say that you want this second line, which is the message OK, to be printed at the same line as the first one, which is checking file integrity. So in a sense, I don't want to print an end of line after the first message. So the way to do this is by modifying the value of the end parameter. So the default value of end parameter is the new line, which is /n. So this is the default value of the end parameter. So that's what you have as default. So if I run this thing, I will get the exact same output as I'm currently having. So if you want to modify this default behavior, you don't want remember what I want. I don't want to have anything at the end. After printing this message, I don't want to be printing anything. So in this case, let me set the end parameter to nothing. So I'll set the end parameter to the empty string, and let me run this, and that's the output that we get. So now the message OK is coming at the same line as the first message, which says checking file integrity. So this is one example of using the end parameter. Let's look at the second example, which is down here. So here I have 2 sentences, and let's say that these sentences are in a paragraph. Now remember, if you are writing a sentence in English, after the first or at the end of the sentence you need a full stop, and you also need a space before the beginning of the next sentence. So you could say after the first sentence, what I want a full stop and I want a space. And if you run this code now, that's what you get. So now we have 2 print statements, but we are getting the output in the same line. And the reason is because now at the end of the print, we are not printing a new line. Rather, in this case, we are printing a space and a dot. And in the first case, we are not printing anything. So the OK message is coming immediately after. The OK message here is coming immediately after the output, which is printed from the first print statement. So that's all what we have for lecture 2. In the first lab that you will have for this class, you'll be given some problems where we will be using the print function to display different kinds of static output. Good luck in the labs.